All right. So I guess welcome to the first ITTV. Jason over there, Scott over here. Jason is your El Presidente. I'm a board member. Jason usually the hitting guy, and I do the pitching stuff. That's kind of in general terms what we do. If you guys do have questions, I know on Instagram I definitely can see them. Facebook Live, I'm gonna toggle and see what I can do to try and find them. But I know at least I can see things on Instagram. And I wrote down a couple other questions. But just to kick it off, I want to, let's see, we already introduced each other. Jason, I actually did this, I don't know, it was like 6 months ago or something. It might have been probably last our off season, which is right in between, like, I guess we have an off season, maybe like after tryouts and the teams were made before Twins camp started in October. So maybe like what was it, September or something. I talked to you for like 45 minutes just about the history of the Twins, and I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation. So I kind of want to start there. I don't want to get too bogged down, but so first off, I don't think a lot of people know this unless they've seen a post or one of the blogs I think we wrote in there. But tell everyone how the Twins got its name.
Well, back in February of 2009, my wife Jennifer and I were fortunate enough to have a set of boy-girl twins. And I was trying to think of a name for the organization around that time, a little after that time, actually. And the Braves are my favorite team, so I was going to go that route. As most people know, there's already a team called the Braves. So I was trying to find a better name that wasn't already taken, and the Twins seemed perfect given the fact that I had a set. So here we are.
Here we are. All right. I mean, we can go into more if people want to, and I can try to look at some other stuff. But what was your goal? And you can go and do as much background as you want. What was your goal with the Twins when you started, and why, or what was the inspiration? I know we've talked about it a lot.
So it probably would have, for me to give that story, I'd have to go back before the Twins, which would be like the Edgewood Bulldogs, Indiana Irish days. I was the second ever travel director for the Bulldogs. And then I was a co-founder for the Indiana Irish back in 2007, I believe. And both at Edgewood and with the Irish, I realized that what I thought travel baseball was is not what it was. So I thought it should be better. It should be more player development driven. It shouldn't just be better looking uniforms and better competition and more games. It should be more than that. So I tried to come up with a way to incorporate more player development stuff. So I traveled over the country looking at organizations that were kind of doing what I thought I wanted to do. I traveled over to Maryland and spent like 3 or 4 days with one of the MPA guys, which is National Pitching Association. He was one of Tom House's minions, or kind of assistants, I guess. And he had a big facility over in Maryland. And so me and a few guys went over there and spent probably 3 or 4 days, saw everything they did. I was blown away, fascinated, thought it was almost exactly kind of what I was envisioning. So I spent the next several years just trying to figure out how to do that with the organizations I was part of. It started with the Indiana Irish. We started an academy out of extra innings back in 2012. Unfortunately, we were spending a ton of money to rent tunnels out of extra innings, and I was literally monopolizing the entire facility with the organization, which they were not very thrilled about. But we gave them a lot of money to do it. And basically just the constraints of space and time, it didn't go off as the way I wanted it to, but it gave me a good idea of how to tweak it once I did have the freedom of space and time. And so I guess that kind of takes us to where we are now. I mean, the Twins started back in 2011-12, and the Twins camp that we have today is far more advanced, far more wide in scope, and just tons better information. And then there's a lot more people involved, obviously. We've got something like 18 to 20 instructors that we're paying pretty much year-round to give lessons and run camp. So it's obviously evolved to where it is now, but we're getting close to realizing the vision that I had almost 10 years ago. So we're close.
Yeah. I know we have that conversation all the time. Do you remember how many square feet, I don't remember if you said that, but that building was, like, give or take? I don't think we're obviously there.
The previous location or extra innings?
The one out east.
So the one by UIndy. That facility was...
No, the one that was the inspiration.
Oh, my. Their weight room was 7,000 square feet. So the entire facility, I believe, was somewhere around 40,000. So I believe extra innings is 22,000. So if you double extra innings, that's about how big the building was. It was a ginormous building.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you'd see is like an Amazon warehouse almost. It was huge.
Yeah.
But they had a full infield. They had 12 or 14, I can't remember the exact number. It was more than 10, real dirt and clay mounds lined up along a wall. And then they had home plates painted on the floor on the turf of different distances. So you could be throwing 12 to 14 bullpens from any distance possible at one time in that facility. They had a full 90-foot infield so their catchers could all throw full distances. They had all kinds of batting cages set up, obviously. A very elaborate netting system, which I still have not been able to duplicate or figure out how they did it. But they had this elaborate netting system where they could pull the nets in all kinds of different ways to create different space for different things they were doing. They had a full performance training program, which really inspired what we do. It was extremely impressive. I mean, they had 2 instructors and a bunch of kids would come in every single night from 6 to 9. They'd run different classes for all of them, very similar to what we're doing now with our performance training. And then the real impressive thing was they had a 7,000 square foot weight room, which, I mean, it was phenomenal. It was like walking in one of the fitness places here around town with all the, free weight stuff and the Nautilus equipment. And I mean, it was impressive. So
yeah. Was that, were they an organization, or were they like a lot of the facilities where they run their own business, but there's multiple teams that run in and out of it and that kind of thing?
So it was both, which is different than what the Twins do, but we're kind of evolving into both. We just did it backwards. I think they started as a public for less than for money type of business, and then an organization was born from that. We're going just the opposite. We've got the organization, and we're creating lesson platforms and opportunities for our instructors, and then obviously for our Twins players. And now we're starting to even reach outside of the Twins for lessons. So we've kind of done it backwards, but I think the end result is going to be we're very similar to what they were. They just, like I said, they just started one way and went the other than how we did it. So,
yeah. What do you think, and I know we've talked about it, we mapped out the next 10 years not too long ago, but what do you think is the next, without giving things away, logical step for the organization, whether it's teams, equipment, structure of the business or structure of the program, off-season things, education? What's the lowest hanging fruit that, I mean, it could be even like the manual that we talked about, but like what are the things that you're seeing is going to be the next thing up that people just don't realize it's going on behind the scenes?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of things. The low-hanging fruit would definitely be we're going to have a coach's manual for all of our coaches that creates probably a better set of guidelines and expectations for what a year being an Indiana Twins coach looks like. Something we've been wanting to do a long time, just got put on the back burner. Technology is probably one of the biggest things I want to bring into the facility to help us with player development, evaluating players. We've gotten to the point that with video in our eyes, I think we're experts at seeing like what players are doing movement wise and mechanically in the throwing delivery and the hitting delivery. But now I need more. I want to know how much ground force are they creating into the ground, and I need force plates to do that. We need software to spit out all those results. We want Rapsodos so that we can build pitch types. We want LED boards that are always showing us what kids are throwing and hitting velocity wise. We want a hit tracks machine to evaluate every swing a kid takes and be able to have reports on a player. So that's the next big thing from a player development standpoint, is to get more technology in our facility. It just comes to that very high cost.
Yeah.
And that's really been always our obstacle, because we don't run things where we make a lot of money. We try to keep our costs down for our players, and so there's not a whole lot of extra money laying around, if any at all, to do those types of things. So that's kind of the next goal. We're obviously wanting to have 2 teams at every age from 8U to 14U, so we've got a little bit of expansion room there. We've created a Twins University program for all of our coaches to become certified in literally almost every area you could think of. That's been completed this year, and our coaches have done an awesome job at taking those and becoming certified. We just had our second guy today become certified in every area. And then obviously from Twins camp perspective, we added the baseball IQ last year. I want to continue to improve that.
And instead of having you ramble on and people be bored by all these things that we're doing, because we're doing a lot, talk to me about, or talk to everyone about Twins IQ and how that, like, I don't know, I feel like that's a pretty fun story with how that, even just part of it with you growing up and then that kind of thing. So talk about that.
Are you talking about the Stratomatic type of stuff, or are you talking? There's a lot of ways baseball IQ came to be. The game part of it, I assume, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, how you love playing games, making up games, and just so briefly.
So as a child, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we didn't have the electronic devices that kids nowadays have. So we had to make stuff up. I mean, that's how we played. And a lot of times, if I didn't have a friend over, I had to figure out how to do things by myself. And baseball was always the thing that I tried to figure things out for. I loved baseball. I wanted baseball 24/7. And so when my friends weren't around, I just made up games to play baseball. I would have statistics on major league players, on all kinds of different ways that I play baseball. And so I really became a very good game creator, for lack of a better term, I guess. And my mom used to joke and say, "You're going to grow up and work for Milton Bradley or one of those gaming companies making games for, kids," because I was just always making up games. And so I've been wanting to come up with a baseball IQ system, and I know kids love games. So I put 2 and 2 together and came up with a bunch of questions that you can pull out of a box randomly that create situations that are pretty random. And we came up with a scoring system and how 2 teams can play each other with it. And so I kind of took that childhood game creating skill that I guess evolved over the years and came up with baseball IQ. And we did it last year. It was okay. I think it's got a lot of room for improvement, but it gave us something to work with, and that's kind of how that came to be. So.
Awesome. Let me see if I have any other notes and things to think about. I'm going to go to a couple of the questions I did see. So I'm going to try and go grab another phone, an old phone, to see if I can boot it up and see if I can get on Facebook to check that. In the meantime, the question was about at-home drills for first baseman, how to work on stretching from the bag and getting better at that.
Okay.
You got it?
I was a first baseman in college, so that one's kind of right in my wheelhouse. I was actually a first baseman from about 12U into college, so it's probably the position I've played the most in my life. What we do is we do something called a halo, where we try to have our first basemen create a halo, which is basically a circle around the bag that shows how far they can stretch out to get a baseball. And then from that halo that's created, we usually set baseballs or cones around, and we have the first baseman stretch out as far as he can from literally every part of the bag all the way around the bag, even in the foul territory for, balls that maybe drop third strikes on the inside part towards the catcher, and then balls that are in the hole between first and second, where a second baseman might field it, deep in right or a shallow right field, and throw a ball to the foul side on the outfield side of first base. So we work the entire bag. I just have the player stretch out. As soon as he gets to his full length of his stretch, I place a ball, and then I go around the entire circle. And that kind of gives him an idea of how far out he can get to field a ball in the air, or whether he has to short hop a ball, or whether he has to even sit back and kind of play a bigger hop from first base. So that's how we determine how far out a guy can stretch. And then from there, we kind of work on balls that are right at the edge of that halo. Do we want to catch those in the air, or can we short hop those? And then balls that land way outside of the halo, do we want to sit back on those and play those as kind of a higher hop? And then balls that are inside of the halo, obviously we should be catching in the air. So that's kind of how we work that. Just as far as stretching, I think that was the main part of the question, correct? Like the stretching part of it?
Yeah. That was
all right. So, obviously there's a lot more aspects to playing first base, shuffling off footwork when you're holding a runner, and back picks, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes into that. But to answer just the question that was asked, that's kind of how we do it, is the halo thing. And then we just work on feeding them balls from different spots on the field, both inside the halo, outside the halo, and right on the perimeter of the halo. So they kind of get used to making those reads.
All right, next question I saw on there, and I did get my old phone. It's got a little line down the middle, but was about recruiting. What is the next step, or what's the next step in the recruiting process after contacting coaches? I'm going to add that, first of all, you should probably contact more coaches. It's a little bit of a numbers game. 1% battery. That's not going to work out very well, is it? Okay. So, what's the next step? Uh-huh.
I said all that for nothing.
Yeah, well. All right, tell them what's the next step.
Next step recruiting after you've reached out to coaches. Part of it depends on the time of the year, and part of it depends on what grade you're in. Not knowing that information from whoever asked this question. So obviously casting a wide –
I can tell you. It's a 17U player, junior.
17U player?
Yep.
So, yeah, that's definitely different than a 15U player. So at 17U, you probably need to start narrowing things down and maybe not quite have as much of a wide blanket cast as far as the number of schools. You should start to be narrowing things down based on, just criteria that you think is important, whether it's size of the school, division of the school, academics, like what majors, all those types of things. And then from there, I think you need to actually get in front of that coach, and whether it's camps, visits, ask them what kind of opportunity you're going to have as far as, seniors, juniors, sophomores in front of you at your position. What role you feel like you'll be in on that team. There's a lot of stuff, but you need to have a list of questions that you can present to those schools that you have narrowed it down to, and try to find out, are you a good fit for them? But the other way is also true. A lot of people don't look both ways at that. So make sure you look both ways at that. I've seen a lot of kids get to schools where, they've been taught how to throw a certain way their whole life, or hit a certain way their whole life, and then all of a sudden it's completely different. I would ask those questions, like, some schools doesn't matter how you hit or throw. They kind of let you do your thing as long as you're successful. Other schools are very specific. So you just need to kind of know that stuff. We've got over 40 kids playing college baseball now, so we've had all kinds of different stories told to us over the years with some of that. Mostly good, but, you know, obviously there are some people that go to places that aren't good fits for them, and, you know, then they're trying to figure out what the next step is. So as much communication as you can legally have with the coach, and even the other players on that team, once you really get serious about the school, talk to the guys that are on that team already, you know, just about coach's temperament and expectations and what a normal day is, a normal week is, a normal month is for someone at that school and that program. So, I mean, I could talk about that probably all day, but that's a good chunk of stuff, I guess.
Yep. I just want to add, I talked to a player last year, 2 years ago, during a tournament game. They had come to watch one of our other teams, and I got talking about junior college and that route. I know it's not as popular around this, you know, around Indiana. I'm from Michigan. There's a few more teams up there, but since there's not as many teams within like a quick stone's throw, a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to go to this school or that school because they're more local. But just there's way too many guys being, I guess, maybe more short-sighted and overlooking the JUCO route. Actually, the guy I was talking to, or the player I was talking to, said, "Isn't that just for dumb people?" And well, that's not the case. Now, if you don't have the grades and that needs to be your in to then getting accepted to a college, then yes, that's one thing. It doesn't make you dumb. Maybe you just didn't respect school for one reason or another or whatever. But in order to get to a higher level in college, a lot of times JUCO is a route. It gives you a ton of time to develop. I mean, 2 years to just mature as a young man, as a ball player, get a ton of reps, and so much. I don't think a lot of the high school guys realize so much of the recruiting from the higher level schools, the D2, the small D1, the big D1, most of their recruiting, if not some of them all, or at least their funds and their money, go right to JUCO guys. They already know what they look like. They can plug and play them. I think it's just an undervalued, at least around here that I know of, route for high schoolers.
Yeah, and usually if you've played 2 years of junior college baseball, one, you've gotten to play, and two, you've now got 2-year data set that you can show whatever level you're trying to transfer to after JUCO. So I think higher level coaches are more confident in pulling kids from JUCO levels into their program because they do have that 2 years of experience of college baseball. They can see the performance at that level. So it's really a good route unfortunately for our high school guys in some cases, especially at the higher levels. It's a good route to get to a higher level for your junior and senior year. So.
Yeah, I know that. If I would have gone to a good JUCO for 2 years and just busted my butt, I don't know. I mean, I played D2, but that's not bad. But there's just some, and I didn't know either. I think I just didn't get much education. I think our guys, they get a lot of education, but still don't really realize. I think there is that little bit of that stigma, but there's some. And then on top of it, I mean, we've seen plenty of guys with tons of talent that just decide for one reason or another not to play in 1 or 2 years. And a college coach, from a business standpoint, that makes just a lot of sense to grab a JUCO guy because they know they're going to play. The chances of a guy who's already played 2 years and wanting to continue playing, just dropping out of school or just saying I'm done with baseball is a lot less likely than your redshirt guy, your freshman or sophomore who's like, well, I haven't played for a year, so meh, heck with that. Come on. All right. Next question. I saw this one in the Facebook. Who came up with the bent nickel game in IQ? I think I heard about this, but I don't know what that is.
Oh, that was actually not IQ. That was mental training.
Okay.
And our treasurer, DJ Payne, was actually the creator of most of our mental training program. He's a big proponent of mental training and the impact that the mental game has on performance. So he wrote a lot of that curriculum, and he actually came up with the bent nickel game, and it was fantastic. And for those that aren't aware of the bent nickel game, it's basically it's a very descriptive way of showing how one bad apple can spoil the bunch, so to speak. And basically the gist of the game is you stack a bunch of nickels, and once you have a bent nickel, it becomes impossible to create a stable stack. So that's where that came from, and it was absolute. Again, I don't know where DJ got it, but it was genius, and the kids got a kick out of it. And I think it's very easy to see the analogy that we're trying to create with that. So it's pretty cool.
Yep. I got another question before I skip on to mine. I'm going to give you the platform on one of these, hopefully to get you fired up, and I know we can get monotone on here. So next question was on there. Some drills to work on fielding the ball out in front. Not my forte. I know we have a whole Twins U course on fielding, so.
Yeah. So one drill that we do to kind of field getting out in front is to put some sort of a PVC pipe or a broomstick or some obstacle out in front of the player that he has to, as he creeps and preps and attacks the baseball and sets up in his fielding position, his glove will be out in front of that obstacle. That kind of forces him to get his hands out in front. That's one drill. You can also do some flat back type stuff. Like we used to have kids get into a fielding position, and if their back was flat, then their arms were usually, or their hands would be out in front of them more. We could put a ball on their back and see if it would sit there. That kind of proves that their back is flat. So usually hands being out is kind of the last domino to fall in all of that. You got to be good with your legs and having a good flat back. That kind of gets the hands out. So just sticking the hands out by themselves isn't the answer there. It's more than that. So, and then you can do rolled balls to kind of control the environment and have them freeze once they fielded the ball and kind of check, are the hands out, are they not? But I will agree with whoever asked that question that fielding the ball deep is a major problem, especially for younger fielders. They lose vision when they get the ball too deep. So definitely a good drill to work on to get the hands out. It will reduce errors if you can field in the proper position, for sure. Beauvais.
Okay, I don't see if anyone on Instagram has any questions. Go ahead and ask them, but I don't see any other questions yet. Let me scroll here. Oops. So anyway, missing practices. Yep, definitely missing practice right now. Okay. Here's one that, with the platform now, I think we can probably both add to it, but I'll let you go. Jason, I'm a 14-year-old freshman. I'm a right-hander. I throw 72 with a nasty curve. I'm a pitcher. I'm a PO. And I got a pretty good changeup. What do you think? I'm trying to get my parents to get me to go to this showcase in a couple weekends. What do you think?
14-year-old freshman?
14-year-old freshman, throwing 72, got a wicked curve. He's right-handed pitcher, PO. Got a pretty good off-speed, like third pitch, change up. Sometimes I throw a little knuckle. So I got 4 pitches. I locate well. I really want to go to the showcase because my he's going to the showcase too. I got a bunch of friends, a couple teams I played against. I really want to go and get in front of some colleges. It's only like $250, you know? What do you think?
As a freshman, showcases are, I think, more for experience than for showcasing anything, unless you're elite. they are good to go to for getting experience. The one thing that I always tell people about showcases is that they're for exposure, but exposure works both ways. So if you're not ready or you're underdeveloped or you're small, it can be good to go to a showcase to show your growth over the next few years. Like, it's not always bad to not have the best measurables at that age, because it can show that there's physical growth, there's baseball savviness growth, there's mechanical growth, there's all kinds of growth there. So it's not always a bad thing. I just wouldn't get too wrapped up in going to too many of those at that age. I certainly wouldn't spend a whole lot of money, unless you have it to spend, I guess, at going to a bunch of those at that age. I think, 16U, 17U, it's a lot more important to maybe get in front of some people that can get your name out there. But again, you got to make sure you're going to show well as you get older. So, I don't know, got mixed feelings on it. I definitely can see positives and negatives both ways with it. I'm not trying to ride the fence. I'm not much of a fence rider. Really.
No kidding. I thought you might have more.
No, but I'm not a huge fan for that demographic going to them, at least in a large number. I think parents and players get a little bit too, I don't know if scared or worried is the right word, but you've got time. You've got plenty of time, even if you're 15, to get to showcases and be seen. So
that made pretty much all the points. I was trying to think of an example where it's pretty common that someone wants to spend a ton of money and go to one or maybe even two showcases. They're really not at like you said, a showcase level. They don't have much to showcase. As a right-hander, I guess I could have said maybe 17 and throwing 70 as a right-hander. I don't know if exposure or experience or any. For a 17-year-old throwing 72 as a right-hander, is there any reason as a PO to go?
No, you would be much better off spending your time getting stronger in the weight room, working out mechanical things, mastering your craft, and then getting that out there, than to, at 17, go and throw 70, we call it 72 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be the best way to show yourself if you're that age. Now, again, 15-year-old throwing 72 is different than a 17-year-old throwing 72. So, sometimes you got to pick where you spend your time, and that person probably needs to be in the weight room.
Yeah. For 200, I mean, what's a normal, like, public just going to an open showcase usually costs?
Oh, well, I mean, we just had the PBR crew come in, right? And it was roughly $200.
Okay. Is it more for the public ones?
Yeah. So if you go to a school, for example, one of their showcases that they host, that can be all over the place money-wise, because they do use that as a fundraiser. So, and I don't think they try to hide that in any way. But so that price can vary pretty greatly. But your traditional, PBR type showcase is usually going to run $175, $250 typically.
Yeah. The reason I brought that up is because, I mean, you can showcase maybe not much, or to your point about trying to get better and improve, spend that on training, a gym membership, a personal trainer that you meet with one time to have them write out a program for you. There's a bunch of online services, lessons, all that, which eventually I'm going to talk about PT for a little bit, but I've got a couple more questions. So,
one thing I'll add to what Scott just said is we do all of that in-house. So any of that stuff that he just mentioned, we have the expertise and the crew to do all that for you. We can write up programs. We have a performance training program and performance training instructors. So yeah, with the twins, there's really no reason that you ever have to go outside. I know there's some people driving from pretty far away, and that would obviously be an exception. But if you're fairly close to us, we can pretty much give you anything you need to get better at baseball.
Yeah, I started the hashtag twin included, which sounds kind of goofy, but I mean, there's a lot. Next one from Michael Camden. With baseball season in jeopardy, when should we start a long toss program? Ooh, that's a
good one. Now, I honestly think kids need to be out throwing a lot right now with this going on. And I know we can't do it in a team setting with the restrictions we have. But man, if you can get out with dad, or even throwing into a net, or if you can get into a facility just by yourself, man, I mean, gosh, you got to throw. That's my biggest worry with this COVID-19 stuff right now, is just all these kids are just not throwing enough. They're hitting balls off tees probably. They're taking ground balls maybe, but they're just not throwing enough. And
yep.
I'm curious to see how arm health is going to be once we all start back up. Let's say if in June, if we all pick back up and start playing again, where's arm health going to be? How many teams are going to throw guys more than they should too early?
Yep.
I know I'm getting on a tangent a little bit, but throw, man, throw as much as you can.
Yeah.
Keep your arms strong.
I saw on Twitter Kevin Youkilis, who's a pretty avid tweeter. He's a little bit hostile sometimes, but he was saying, kind of insinuating that with all this time off, there's going to be more health potentially, because guys aren't throwing as much and they're getting more recovery time and all that, so they're going to be healthier. And then people are barking back saying, well, if they come back too quick, then you might see more injuries. And like you said, it's the same thing as in spring training when people don't ramp up long enough or have any type of long toss program or throwing beforehand or throwing bullpens. They come in and throw their first 3 innings, all out if they're trying to make a roster or whatever it is. It's the same thing for a lot of our, to struggle with guys that play basketball. And then they show up, with 2 weeks of practice time for baseball. And then if their coach isn't, adhering by any type of pitch regulations, if they throw a complete game in their first outing, with the Twins, they're going to have weeks and weeks and weeks built up. I think it's like 10 to 12 weeks where we start basically from scratch. Starts with long toss, and then we do a pitch progression. But, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Next question from Mr. Artizone. What type of bullpens should players be doing on their own? Once a week? How many pitches? I'll kick that off with it's going to depend. So if we take someone in our program that's asking this, so let's say with Mike's son, we have the data on that, and we can have those conversations. And I've talked to a few parents that and a few players. If you have the capacity to throw at home, in college I threw in my basement to a mattress. I did with wiffle balls. That's probably not as good, but it was something. If you have the capacity to do it in your backyard, or like you said, Jason, with a barn or something like that, and you're in our program and you just started back up or you have been throwing, we can tell you where your progression was and where it should be. So if you miss 2 weeks, then you basically repeat the previous one. If you miss 3 weeks, then you go back. So you're going to have to start going back. So if you haven't thrown in a month, then you're going to have to go back in your progression from where you were. If you haven't, and I would say at least once a week right now, we're probably looking still a month out with everyone announcing the tournaments. So once a week right now is probably going to be fine. You might want to add to that, but at least for our guys. For others that are not in the organization, let's take a guy who is playing with the Indiana Fun Baseball League, and they're 13, and they had practices in the off season every Saturday for 8 weeks, and they just started throwing bullpens for about the last 4 weeks. So the last bullpen was a month ago, and they threw 60 pitches. What do you think?
I think they need to do what?
You can critique how they did it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknown variables there. I mean, I'll start with, before I start to the 13-year-old that's not in our organization, with all of our pitchers, we have that data. So we can give you exactly where any kid in our program, if they were to start throwing tomorrow, how many pitches they should throw in a bullpen, both based on total pitches and innings that they should throw. So a Twins player, that's very easy to get that to a parent with some instructions on wait time in between innings. We have that naturally in our program with multiple kids throwing. There's a natural inning built in there. When you're throwing with dad, sometimes it's real easy to throw 60 or 70 straight pitches without a break. I would not do that. I wouldn't recommend anyone doing that. So we can help with all of that with Twins. As far as the 13-year-old from another program who got up to 60 pitches and has now been off 4 weeks, I'd like to know how he got to the 60 pitches in 4 weeks. First of all, that's a pretty quick amount of time to get to that high number of pitches and not have thrown until January, which I think is what you were alluding to.
I say that because it's probably not too far-fetched.
No, it's probably extremely accurate. So, I mean, first of all, that player probably got to 60 pitches too quickly, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother story. So I would definitely, if I were that kid, try to get a few innings of 15 pitches. I would, if he was at 60, maybe start back at 3 15s, and then build up from there. But again, I guess I could go on a tangent about how he got to the 60, but I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I think that kid needs to start with 15 pitch innings, 2 or 3 of them, and then build up from there. And he can build up every time he throws as long as he's given himself 3 or 4 days in between throwing to recover. So, and the one thing I'm going to add on the whole pitching thing is the Twins are probably thought of as too conservative when it comes to handling pitchers. And I would argue that we're actually very aggressive. We push our pitchers to throw the absolute max number of pitches that they can throw in a year. We don't go way under that number. I want them pushed to the limit of that number. We throw our kids almost year round, not on the mound, but we throw. They do a lot of throwing in our camp. So our kids throw a ton. Now they don't pitch a ton, but every kid in our program throws between 400 and 600 mound competitive pitches from January to the middle of March. So that 10 to 12 week period that Scott was talking about, our kids are throwing competitive pitches off a mound to hitters for about a 10-week period. So over that 10 weeks, that's 400 to 600 pitches before they ever go pitch outside. So because of that, we do monitor their game and season pitches pretty closely because we don't want guys to be thrown way too much. But I think our guys throw a lot, and we encourage them to throw a lot. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception that we're too conservative. We monitor very closely, but we're not too conservative. We're pretty aggressive with our arms. So
let me see a question. Ryan Hoover, if we get to play this year, how are you feeling about your 11U team?
Well, there's 2 11U teams, and I'm actually very happy with both 11U teams. I think they're both going to be very competitive. Our new 11U team this year, coached by Scott Watkins, already played in a preseason tournament and did quite well with it against older players. So I'm very excited about that group. And then our group, we've added some very good talent to our group. They've bought in very well to our program. They've attended everything very well in the off season. And I'm super excited about the 11U Clymore squad having a very good year. I'm hoping that this whole COVID-19 thing doesn't have any impact on that, because I thought we were really gelling and coming together pretty well, and I was getting really excited about starting the season and seeing how these guys all did together, and now this has happened. So hopefully we can pick it up and roll on as if nothing happened here whenever they let us do that.
How's DJ looking, your son?
So DJ was given a week off completely last week of baseball, other than e-learning. But his dad went and spent a whole lot of money on baseball equipment so that we can start working this week at our house. So we've got.
Has he been doing his exercises?
He's been doing his exercises that he was assigned to do, and other than that, we've just hit tennis balls in the backyard a little bit and thrown. So we've tried to go really light on baseball. This is his spring break week, so I was trying to give him a spring break week. But we're gonna ramp everything back up as soon as all the stuff comes in that we ordered. So.
Got a couple college guys on Instagram. You guys go ahead and chime in if you've got anything to add. But so for a college guy who still has eligibility left and
what a mess.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's all finalized or not or what, but for a college guy who's got eligibility left and is not playing right now, because that's what all of them, right? What should they be doing for the next, what is it, I guess, 5 months until fall ball? Because you've got, obviously you can do lessons, you can do workout, you can do rest, you can play for a summer team. What type of summer team? For a guy that, let's say, needs to develop, whether it's to make a starting roster, to get picked up out of JUCO, or to try and get drafted. So a guy that needs to make that next leap, what does he need to do?
I think the way I would answer that question with anybody with time off is to become a better mover. Learn how to move better. That's so underrated. So that would be the first thing, is just if you can go somewhere to get an assessment. Indiana Twins do that, by the way. Get an assessment to see how well you move, where your weaknesses are, so that a program could be built for you on how to improve that movement. That's got to be the number one thing for a kid that age, just to improve how he moves, because that's going to make you more versatile. It's going to keep you healthy. It's going to allow you to run better, probably field better, hit better, throw better. Just everything is going to happen almost without you even doing much mechanical work if you can just move better. The body tends to do that pretty efficiently and naturally if we don't mess with it too much. So that would be my first piece of advice. And then on top of that would be, I guess, depending on the age of the player. For example, I've talked to some seniors that do have a year of eligibility that are not going to go back and play. So that would be my first question, because do you still want to play baseball?
Right.
And I assume that the answer to that question is yes. But given a yes answer to that, as much throwing, I'm always going to go back to throwing, regardless of what position you play. You have to keep your arm strong. If your arm gets weak, the number of positions you can play on a baseball diamond just diminish significantly. So keep your arm strong however you have to do that, whether it's throwing with a buddy, whether it's throwing into a net, throwing in the backyard, whatever you got to do. And then if you can get your swings in somehow, obviously if you're just a pitcher, then, throwing becomes even more important. But it's tough right now because you can't do things with people. So that you're having to find ways to do things by yourself, which is challenging. But the ones that want to play, the ones that have a passion for it, are going to figure out ways to do it and stay sharp. So, that's a generic answer, I guess, without knowing exactly what kid it is and what positions they play and what what age they are, and we could get specific with all of that information. But arm strength and moving, those are the two big ones. And then, obviously, if you play a position, keep your bat.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked to a handful of guys who are just seeing it. It's really relevant right now. And I just worked with a guy a few weeks ago where, come to find out, squat, deadlifts, and a ton of other exercises were just out of this world, almost like beginning, or, well, I mean, not beginning, maybe like intermediate, like powerlifting type numbers probably, or on that route or on that direction. And I was like, hey, those are great, but there's kind of diminishing returns at some point. If you can deadlift 800 pounds, which that wasn't the number, but if you can deadlift 800 pounds, but you can only, have exit velo of 88 or throw 85, then at some point someone should have interjected in your training process and said, hey, let's do an assessment, and then let's also of your body, but then let's also assess your programming, because you need to have more explosive exercises. You need to not have all these max rep things because you are plenty strong. There's just a lot of different things from a training standpoint and it's not the fault of the college or high school players, or even above that, but just understand, I think guys need to consider adjusting their training, because this particular person hadn't made too many huge strides in the last few years, but the best that they had felt was a couple of years ago when their training program included a lot more explosive exercises, a lot more single leg exercises. As a baseball player, you're on your one leg a lot. So if you're doing a lot of bilateral or two-legged exercises, there is some transfer, but there's also some transfer doing single leg exercises. So highly encourage that. This person didn't believe that their core was very strong. That's something to work on. So training doesn't have to be 100% sport specific, but it can't all be just bench, deadlift, and squat and curls or that kind of thing. So I know, just something to add and consider.
And one of the things to add to that with that particular player that we learned when we were working with him was the assessment isn't only just for physical constraints or things that need to be worked on. A lot of it can be proprioception, which is basically a big word for the nervous system talking to the muscular system. In this case, like, he literally was struggling with feeling certain parts of his body doing things. And an assessment can show that. So it doesn't mean he couldn't do it physically. It just means that the connection between the nervous system and his brain and his muscular system wasn't there. So by doing the assessment, it pointed that out. And then once we saw it, we were able to tell him that, and he was able to put some focus. In other words, he was able to connect those wires together and start to feel some of the things that he hadn't felt before. So an assessment is more than just to find out how well or how bad you move in different areas, but it's also a way for us to find out, well, man, this kid doesn't understand what it means to flex his core at contact or flex his core as he releases. He thought he was doing it and he's not. And by him failing maybe an assessment checkpoint, we find that out. So there's a lot to the assessment. I know there's a lot of people critical of assessments, but there's a lot of very positive things, and there's a reason that the brightest people in the world are doing them and standing at the mountaintop screaming, do assessments, do assessments, do assessments.
It's critical of an assessment.
There's people that are critical.
A lot of people don't know about them.
Yeah, there's people that are critical, and there are people that don't know about them, and sometimes that's one in the same group. But there are people that are critical of, you can, because of proprioception problems, you can fail an assessment. And so to the people that are critical, they think that that's a physical problem when it's not. But I think someone doing the assessment has to be educated enough to know when someone fails something in the screening, whether it's proprioception related or a physical constraint.
Gotcha.
And you can definitely cheat or fail the assessment with some of the stuff. And I guess that could be a critique of it. But I think as long as the person doing the assessment knows what they're doing, that's going to be tough to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I was like, people, I guess for a good assessment from a good assessor, then yeah, there's probably not much argument, but that makes sense.
Yeah, my only critique of an assessment would be they have to be done frequently enough that you're getting current data. I mean, you can't do an assessment on someone and then a year later still be working off of that same assessment. Proprioception changes and obviously the body changes.
Yeah. All right, Spencer wants to know, because his dad was asking, he said Spencer is asking, what are some first base picking drills we can do inside?
Ooh, perfect. So you can get him out at his halo length, so stretch him out to whatever that max distance is where he can maintain connection to first base, and just feed him short hops that are right at the edge of that halo, where he's just, working through those almost like an infielder doing a short hop drill, only in this case he's stretched out, and do some drills that way. You can do those to the forehand and to the backhand, although keep in mind that first basemen generally are going to catch balls in a much more narrow window as far as backhands and forehands than infielders will. Not always, there are exceptions to that, but if you're stretching towards where the baseball's coming from, you shouldn't have to be stretching, like reaching with your arms a whole lot at first base. A lot of things should be in front of you if you're stretching at the right time. Now, a lot of people stretch too soon, and then they have to get reachy with their arms, but most first basemen shouldn't have to do that. So just keep that in mind when you're doing the drills. And then the next thing would be to get far enough away to test the read or give the first baseman the time needed to make a read on whether they need to pick the ball, stay back on the ball, or catch the ball in the air. So that can be done in the house if you've got enough space. A garage, you could probably get enough space if you're going diagonally in a garage. Definitely in a driveway, most people's driveway, you could have enough space to work on that. So it's just a matter of giving the first baseman time to go from his footwork to the stretch position, making a read, and then, then him just picking it, catching it, or staying back. So, yeah, a lot of first base stuff that you can do, but
could you use, I've never done first base drills other than a handful of, I guess, just practices in high school, but could you do differential learning? So mixing up the implements and the weight. So what I'm thinking is we use it in hitting and in pitching. Could you do with picking? I throw a tennis ball, like I'm thinking if I'm on the concrete in the driveway and dad's throwing me a baseball, it's going to hop one way. A tennis ball, one way. A racquetball, another way, and it's smaller. A wiffle ball, another way, and it's weird. And then a mini golf wiffle ball. Like, could you mix up things? Would that be more of a challenge? Would that work? Or is that too much going on?
You could do that, obviously, if you want to. It depends on what you're trying to develop there. If it's reaction time to bad hops and how quickly you can move hands around on different things, I guess. The thing with a baseball is we have different surfaces, but for the most part, a baseball is a baseball. And that's the problem with doing any of this stuff on cement with a tennis ball or any type of bouncy ball, is you're not going to get the same bounce hop that you would get with a baseball. So that's where it makes it a little bit more difficult. And a lot of that stuff, pick stuff, you can do on carpet in your house from a pretty short distance. I think the part that's tough at first base, like it's with everything with baseball, there's timing involved. And a first baseman has to know that he's looking at where the ball's coming from. He has to wait for the ball to leave that person's hand before he stretches to it. and there's timing with that.
Yep.
So you have to create that same amount of time with the first baseman in a drill as you would in a game, so that they get that timing down. So that's going to be the toughest challenge with all this going on. I think a driveway is enough space as long as the person's not throwing, 80 miles an hour across the driveway. I think you can kind of create that time.
Yeah.
So, and if you could have 3 or 4 people, brother, mom, dad, throwing from different angles, that's even better, because now they're working on maybe forehands, backhands. They're working on different throws coming at them because they're different people. I mean, there's first base is there's a lot of stuff you can do, but just don't forget the timing part of it.
Yep.
So.
Okay, I'm going to take this next one because it looks to be pitching from Hoover again. I have a long, lengthy kid on my team, and he throws hard, but he throws straight over the top. Assuming we're talking about pitcher. Maybe not. And he has no run on the ball, and I've been trying to fix it, but I've been struggling with it. What is the best way to fix that? Bryan, I'm going to ask you to elaborate.
You got to let me chime in on this one too, depending on how you do this. But I think you're gonna say the same thing. But I'll wait.
Well, so if it's a pitcher, and we'll see if he elaborates. Long and lengthy kid, that's fine. Throws hard, which is great. Definitely. I mean, I'm gonna stop there. If he throws hard and he throws strikes and he's healthy, leave him alone. That's my first thing. If you have a pitcher, or you are a pitcher, and you throw hard relative to your age or your level of play, and you throw strikes, and you probably maybe have a couple pitches, and you have no pain, we as instructors and coaches should not touch you. Are there tweaks and things? Maybe. If you don't look the greatest, maybe we have a conversation at some point, but I'm trying to have less and less of a conversation with any player that is not hurt, throws hard, and throws strikes, because that's what every single parent and coach and catcher and infielder, like anybody, wants a guy that throws hard, doesn't get hurt, so he can throw a lot, and then throw strikes. You just want that. So it is a pitcher, struggles to throw strikes sometimes. Okay. So throws hard, struggles to throw strikes sometimes, straight over the top, and has no run on the ball. I'd be curious what straight over the top is, because
that's exactly where I was going with that.
Straight over the top, the people think this right here. If I can get back, I'll stand that a little bit. So people think this is straight over the top. If that was the case and the ball was released right here, then the spine would need to be here. So my spine right here is there. The ball might be releasing over top, and that's where my hand is. But this arm angle never changes for a guy that throws over the top. And by arm angle, I mean my spine is here, then from my spine across my chest to here through my arm. This angle between somewhere in 0 and like 15 or 20 degrees, this position right here that you're seeing, this little L or whatever you want to call it, is never going to change. So sidearm guy, 3/4 guy, you notice I'm tilting with my spine. Over the top guy, Tim Lincecum. Most of your guys, a lot more guys than you realize. And then your submarine guys are thrown here. And every single time the chest and the spine is moving with it. So just want to point that out. If a guy releases over the top, that is fine. If we're here, if we're like this, that might be a struggle and issue, maybe. We could try to tighten that up. But yeah, if he's not throwing strikes, I hate to focus on too many mechanical cues, because especially a guy that throws hard, the more he's thinking about, and I tell our other instructors and coaches this all the time, because I'm actively trying to work on it, and I've been trying to work on it probably the last 3 or 4 years. The more I say, potentially the less velocity that comes out of his hand, because I tell our guys, your mind can focus unbelievably well on one thing, pretty good on 2 things, and the more variables you have, your mind just doesn't work as efficiently or as fast, and your body isn't able to produce as much. Take, for example, a squat. Put a barbell here, you're on 2 legs, you squat. It's pretty much an up and down movement. It is actually pretty dynamic, but as long as there's not a ton of weight, most people can do that pretty simply. As soon as you start splitting legs and adding a weight onto another side, it becomes more dynamic. So like pitching, then me throwing cues at them is going to confuse them more. They're not going to be able to throw as hard. So I guess to answer the question, I would have to see him to see if he's all jacked up or not. Chances are he probably isn't. But if he is a guy that doesn't throw strikes well, consistently, week after week after week, my first experiment is going to be to just put either the mound or the target or whatever it is a little bit closer, see if he's fine, and then add a progression. Because if he moves well, he throws hard, he doesn't have pain, I don't really want to screw around with the mechanics too much. So I'm just going to make it a little bit closer, a little bit easier, because maybe it's just a mental thing. So if I just change the vision, I don't have to change anything the way he's moving, because he moves that way for a reason. And if he throws hard, it's a pretty good reason. That's where I would start. There's an endless amount of things in the toolbox that you could do to it, but I would start if he's throwing hard, not very many strikes, but with health. I'm just going to put it a little bit closer to change the vision. If you've got time, if you don't have time, then I would start working with, if I miss high, aim low. If I miss low, aim high. There's a couple other things, but I'm going to get too long-winded. So Jason, what do you want to add?
I mean, the thing that really stood out to me with the question is over the top. That's, I don't know, it's a pet peeve, a soapbox I could get on there. What I would do to check that kid on video is, what does his arm-shoulder relationship look like at release? If that's a straight line, like Coach Haase just said, he's okay. If it's a right angle because his shoulders are square and his arm is straight up, like Coach Haase is now, that's probably a problem. And I would be shocked if he doesn't have pain if he's throwing very hard, if he does that.
I would check the angle too, because if I'm a pitcher throwing right here, this looks pretty straight, but then if you turn it, there's actually quite a bit there. So make sure you're getting the right kind of diagonal angle of the video.
Yeah. And if you're a dad watching this, please, please, please do not tell your kid to throw over the top. Throwing over the top is okay, but we see more bad arm action and more bad deliveries because kids are forcing over the top because dads told them to do that. And it just is so hard to fix. It's so hard to deprogram and reprogram that because their nervous system has just got that wired in there for so many reps, and it's hard to fix. So just, if you're a dad watching this, I beg and plead with you, do not tell your kid to throw over the top.
I'm going to give a visual if I can on my bench here. So if I'm a lefty, in order to throw over top, look what my body has to do. Because here, let's make it back further. Stand up. So let's say my hips are turned and I'm releasing over top. So my hips and legs are going to stay put here, and then my body has to be over here. Your spine can only bend so much. This requires a ton of flexibility, which Tim Lincecum had. He was incredibly hypermobile and really strong relative to his size. So for me to get in this position repeatedly over and over and over and not expect any type of low back pain, hip pain, or anything like that, it's a tough position to do. Guys do it, but that's a really tough position.
Well, and the bigger problem, though, is like Coach Haase's tilting his spine, which is the correct way to throw over the top if you're going to throw over the top. What we see with a lot of kids, though, and this is why throwing over the top can be such a bad cue for a young athlete that takes that literally, is they don't know to tilt their spine. So they try to keep their shoulders square and try to throw over the top. And now they've got shoulder pain and elbow pain. So That's why you just got to be really careful with the whole throwing over the top thing, because again, if you can tilt your spine like Coach Haase did, that's better. That's the correct way to throw over the top. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that we see with arm action is if you ask a kid why he throws the way he throws, he says, "I'm trying to throw over the top." Well, where'd you get that at? And it's going to be a coach or a dad. So.
Let me see if Bryan explained anymore. Strikes. Doesn't get to that. Clock moves 72. That helps. Okay. I think that's enough. Any disadvantages to having to throw bullpens without access to a mound? I mean, yeah, I mean, currently right now, if you don't have a mound, I guess welcome to the club because most people don't. So are you at a disadvantage to those that have some type of indoor mound? Sure, but I mean, you're not alone. Everyone's in the same boat. But if you're able to be throwing at all to any type of target at a decent distance with the baseball and you have access to all that, you're probably well ahead of the curve of people that, regardless of having that stuff, I mean, there's a lot of guys that aren't throwing. So if you can throw in any capacity, you're going to be ahead of the game.
Yep. The one thing you may ask kids that are throwing on flat ground, Eugene Bleeker just did a study, it's been fairly recently, where he tested bulgus stress on numerous pitchers on flat ground and on the mound, and he actually found that there was more bulgus stress on flat ground than from the mound. So I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is make sure you're checking with your player if he is throwing a lot of pitches on flat ground, that there's just no pain. There's no more pain. There shouldn't be any more pain than when he's throwing off of a mound. But again, with that study, we know that he probably is putting a little bit more stress on the joints throwing flat ground than if he were throwing. But again, shortstops throw from flat ground, outfielders throw from flat ground, catchers throw from flat ground. So I don't want to put too much into that. But when you're making a lot of pitches from flat ground, just maybe worth asking the player how he feels in comparison to when he's on the mound physically.
Right. Let's see if there's anything else. If I can miss some things. Is this the same assessment the boys did during the 8-hour hitting camp?
For the most part.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we, as much as, I mean, we were really excited to have that hitting and pitching camp, and we're going to do it again next year, and we're hoping to continue to build on that. As much as people watching might think 8 hours is a ton of time, you and I, Jason, have both said we could teach respectively, like me just doing pitching for an entire week or weekend and still not cover everything, and you for hitting. We actually had gone back and forth on whether or not we would do a pitching all weekend and hitting all weekend, and you just had to pick one because we just had that much information. So how does that relate to the assessment? I tried to do as much bang for the buck with that assessment that we did for hitting and pitching. It was pretty much the same one for the most part. And even really from us looking at mechanics, it was fairly similar. There's a couple slight differences, but I've got as many as, I think it's over 30 different physical assessments that I can do when I work with guys one-on-one if I have the time. But yeah, that one that we did in the 8-hour was a really good assessment, and we've matched up with video. Chances are, at least locally, if not maybe throughout the state, that's one of the better assessments that players are going to receive unless they're going to work with someone who's maybe a physical therapist or a college athletic trainer, that kind of thing like that. So.
And Haase, do you want to let people know about OnBaseU and the baseball-specific assessments they've come out with, and not even baseball-specific, but hitting and pitching-specific, and how you've been certified in that, and those are the assessments that we give our players, and even the app that's been born out of that assessment that can help us?
Yeah, so I'll try to be as brief as possible because there's kind of a long history. So TPI, what stands for Titleist Performance Institute, is worldwide, globally known in the golf world, which is a rotational sport with an implement. They rotate their body. Pitchers and hitters, they rotate their body. So there's a lot of similarities. Anyways, they're the biggest education platform or program or organization or company within golf in the world, and they teach throughout the world. They've got literally, I think it's either tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of instructors across the world, and they've been doing it for 20 years. They've worked with a ton of major league teams in baseball, much of other sports too, over those 20 years, and with some of the top people, obviously the top players as well, and they've got a ton of data on them. And they said, hey, after 20 years of doing this and perfecting it in the golf world, we've been working with all these baseball and softball and other players. Let's start an assessment or training program for coaches and instructors and medical professionals, trainers, physical therapists, doctors, to be able to assess baseball and softball players physically, relating that to throwing and hitting. And let's kind of get it out to the masses. So they released that, I guess it was 13 months ago now. So not a month ago, but 13 months ago, February. Arizona was the first one. They do it throughout the country at random times of the year. It's a weekend training where you go either for pitching and or hitting. I went to the pitching one in February when they launched it last year, and you learn all the assessments. I think there's about 15 different assessments based on all the data they've accumulated over the last 20 years. And it can basically predict, based on the assessment, what a pitcher will look like without having ever seen them throw. And then if you have seen them throw, you can then go to that assessment, whether you have it or not, and then kind of understand, okay, this is why this person moves, and then here are some options. Whether it's a mechanical fix or a physical fix or strength fix or something, now we have that data, and the coach is more equipped with the best information to make a more efficient change without having to just throw a bunch of stuff at them and try things and see whatever sticks. So I guess an example would probably help explain it easier. So the best thing I can do in this little realm is they had one that was pretty interesting, because some of them I had seen because I've done some form of an assessment over the years for the last like 7 or 8 years. The one that I didn't ever see was for a pitcher, again, I'm left-hander, to stick your arm 90 degrees. They had, I don't know if it was a dowel or whatever, you can use a pen. If you stick your arm out like this with a pen, or you can do your thumb, and you turn it all the way back into like a curveball position, and then turn it all the way forward into a change-up position. This can tell whether or not you have the flexibility, whether it's wrist or elbow, whatever it is, to be able to throw a over-the-top curveball or a pretty solid changeup. So if I was, let's go with the easy one. If I go like this right here and I can't turn it anymore, there's a really good chance my curveball is going to look like a slider because I can't ever get on top of that. So the release will actually be out here, but I'm just putting it up here. So when I release the ball like this, I want my curveball to be like that. But if my wrist doesn't get to this position and it only goes that far, it's going to look like more a slider. I'm going to get to the side of it, then it might barrel roll. It's going to look more like a slider. So based on that one little assessment, I can tell a guy, hey, if let's say his name's Billy. I said, Billy, do this. And he goes there and he's limited. He doesn't have that flexion. And I say, hey, do you throw a curveball? And he says, yeah. And I said, does it drop 12-6 like that, or is it more like a slurve? And I would know if I could probably tell him. I'd say, hey, it's probably more like a slurve, isn't it? He'd say, yeah. I said, well, do you try to throw the 12-6? Yeah. So what do you do? He's like, well, I try to get on top of it. And then when I video him, he might come up here and try to pull off to get on top of it because he's making up for not having the range of motion in his wrist. A ton of information from one simple little test, and the whole body works the same way. And that's just for pitchers, and they've got it for hitting. So I was the first one in the state of Indiana to get that assessment. And as of, I looked like last week, or maybe it was this week, I think there's only one other person that has the pitching certification in Indiana. There's a handful that have the hitting certification, but they're going to be coming out with a level 2 at some point. So Anything else you want me to add to that?
No, I think that covered it. The only thing I would add to that is that we're going to we've been tinkering with the assessment, both on how we're going to implement it and to what scope. And I think now we're finally through some of that experimentation phase and going to start to do that more regularly in camp, to the point that we're even talking about having all of the athletes come pre-camp next year. We'll schedule out a couple weekends where, you've got 5-6 hours of a window. You can come on a Saturday and Sunday to try to get those assessments in before camp, so that we can start to assign individual programs for athletes. That's the game plan, at least. That's our high level goal to pull off next year for Twins camp.
Yeah, I'm laughing because one of our former or original Twins starters here that started with Jason, Scott Bryan, said Haase, and he spelled my name wrong. He said, "Put your hat on correctly." Because of that, no, I'm not going to put it on correctly. That's funny. Yeah, if you want, we can add to that. Scott Bryan helped start the Twins back in, was it 2012?
Yeah, 2012. He coached the first ever Twins team, and basically it was him and John Reel and I that kind of got this thing off the ground back then. So, yeah. Scott's son, Alec, is our 15U assistant coach, and his stepson Avery is Avery Short, who came in and hung out with us at Twins camp for a couple of days back in the winter. So
let's see.
But I'm glad he called you out on your hat.
He said he spelled it wrong on purpose. Two S's. You're a funny guy. Let's see. Are you able to remotely or evaluate remotely? We are in the Panhandle of Florida. Yes. The easiest way to reach out to us is, I guess, through email. You can send a message through any social media at Indiana Twins or indianatwins@gmail.com. I'll be able to do that. I'm getting to the point where I really, really, really want to go virtual with it and be able to do these assessments more regularly. But because we're still perfecting it in-house and just kind of without having done it virtually as much, it isn't as smooth. And there's just so many other things that we need to work on that I haven't really prioritized it. But if you're wanting it, then definitely, reach out, because I'm more than capable of doing it. Whether it's pitching or hitting, I'll probably involve Jason if it's on the hitting side, so we can do that. Yes, Scott Bryan, who's trying to, I think, get in my good graces. I think he wanted to make mention. He wanted to make mention of 6 MLB guys, so we've had some success, including Avery. So Jason, I guess you can plug our success with. We've had over 40 guys playing college, but also we've had guys getting drafted.
Yep, it's working pretty well so far.
Let me see if there's anything else. So we got a couple minutes. We actually don't have a time limit because Instagram Live already started over once at an hour. Let's see. We can probably chop this up halfway in between somewhere when we put it out. Let's see. Well, the last thing I had written down, I wanted to give you the platform. Let's try to keep it to a couple minutes. Unless I see any other questions. Oh, Packers fan. I'm hoping to get you fired up, Jason, or at least passionate to talk about something that's very important to us and our program that we try to preach to our players, our parents, our coaches, our instructors, and always have, regardless of our ideas with it, evolving and changing and adjusting in the way we implement it, adjusting. We have always, from before I knew you, before the Twins, probably before the Irish, everything, PT, performance training, workouts, exercising, working on your body. Why, Jason Clymore, would in the world that be more important than having Johnny go to work with, some guy that played in the minors who sits on a bucket and tells him how to pitch? Why in the world would I spend money for someone to go work out when I can spend that to work with a minor leaguer?
I think that
let me preface, both are fine. Working with anyone's fine. Both are fine. But why do you and I and everyone continue to push that movement and training and exercise in the body should be first?
Because we work with a large number of players every year, over 100, each of us on the pitching and hitting side, who we are trying to get to do things either in the batter's box or on the mound, and they are physically incapable of doing it. So we can yell and scream and be mean and be nice and have all the greatest intentions in the world to help that player mechanically. They literally are unable to do what we're asking them to do. And that's why I said earlier, become a better mover if you're a college guy. That really goes for everyone. The question was, I think, for a college guy. But the analogy that I always use for this that I think people really understand well is my cup analogy. And I don't remember where I got this. I know John Reel used it as well. He may have even come up with it. But we can take a really young kid, let's say a 7-8-year-old, who his body is capable of holding 4 ounces worth of liquid. Now, this is all like an analogy, so I'm not talking like literal amounts here. But let's say an 8-year-old's body is a 4-ounce cup. Well, when we get him, he's only performing at a 1-ounce level. So we have huge growth that we can do with a really young kid without him ever getting in a weight room, or obviously an 8-year-old's not going to be in a weight room other than just basic movement stuff. But there's a lot of growth we can make with that young player without getting him involved with PT stuff. I can take him from 1 ounces to 4 ounces pretty quickly just with mechanical stuff. But once I get him to 4 ounces of performance, he has to get a bigger cup. He has to become a 6-ounce cup. And the only way you can become a 6-ounce cup is to become a better mover, become stronger, become more flexible, all of those things. It's really all of those things. Some people's more of one thing or the other. Once he's a 6-ounce cup, then I can push him physically to achieve better things in the batter's box at a 6-ounce level. Once I've gotten him to the 6-ounce level in the batter's box, he's now got to become an 8-ounce cup, which requires better movement, more flexibility, more strength. Once he becomes an 8-ounce cup, I fill him back up to 8 ounces of the batter's box movement and skill. Then he's got to become a 10-ounce cup. And you kind of see where I'm going with this is that we're constantly chasing that. So we get, I guess to go backwards now, we get a lot of kids that are new to our program that are 13, 14-year-old kids that within a few sessions with us, we can get them, let's say they're a 12-ounce cup by then. Well, they come in at 9, 10 ounces of performance. So it's really easy for us to get them to the 12-ounce cup. But then for whatever reason, they don't come to PT. They lack flexibility. They lack strength. So we bang our heads against the wall. We cannot get them any better than what their body's going to allow them to do. And that's where PT is so important. It increases your cup size and gives us more room to develop the skill in the athlete. And so a lot of times we have kids that are 14 years old that are in a 4-ounce cup, and we can't do anything with them until they become a bigger cup. And that's, it's just frustrating for us because it makes us look bad as far as instructors, and I can see how that would be, but behind the scenes we're going, this kid can't move, so I'm trying to get him to do something in the batter's box or on the mound, and he's just not capable of doing it. So here's what we've had to do as instructors. and this has taken a lot of research and education on our part, is we're now trying to coach around that. So we are now, instead of trying to put a square peg in a round hole and keep banging our heads against the wall and making the kid upset, we are now trying to coach around it. So we're going to alter the mechanics that we teach. We're going to alter some things that we do to try to force this kid that can't move into a mechanics system that's as optimal as we can do for that kid. So it's unfortunate that we've kind of had to go to that step, but that's coaching. I mean, coaching is you got to make whatever you have better. Yep. I'm just saying that it would help us a lot if all of the kids bought into the PT so that we could have constantly evolving, increasing size glasses so that we want to chase that more than hit this brick wall and have to figure out, okay, now how do I work around this brick wall that I have, this limitation that I have to now figure out a way to coach around it. We'd rather not do that because it's just not the most efficient way to go. So that's kind of my soapbox with PT. I mean, we just see it. We see it as instructors that, I mean, I can think of probably a dozen kids right off the top of my head in our program that could really be elite players. They just have movement constraints. And so it holds them back. And, you know, we're trying to figure out how to get that elite performance level out of a non-elite mover. So, and it's just tough to do. So.
From the pitching side, I mean, I've had this conversation this year a ton of times with parents. This is just one exercise. If you're not using a pair of bands or something to strengthen this joint right here, if you're a thrower and you don't have a very strong joint, the only thing other than skin and fat and fashion, some other things that's allowing your arm to stay attached is the muscles in here. If those muscles are weak and underdeveloped because there's no exercise going on with them, then regardless of how mechanically sound you are, there's still going to be stress, even if you're the best at mechanics, on your arm. And if you want your arm to be healthy, then there's some bands you can grab. These are Jaeger bands. We use crossover symmetry bands. We're good with the Jaeger bands too. This is the simplest thing you can do. You can do them every day. You can do them 3 times a day to strengthen up the joint and some of the muscles around there so that you're less susceptible to injury, because no one's going to be perfect. And even a perfect guy is going to throw more than maybe his muscles are ready to throw. So, yeah, if you don't have the strength and you go and do something explosive, which is sports, then you're just asking for injury and not optimal performance. It just makes logical sense. But
and to the point of the – go ahead, Haase.
No, I was going to pivot.
Oh, all I was going to say is that I think it's so important that in my house, around my front door, is some sort of contraption that I had to buy in order to get crossover symmetry bands to where my son can use them every day. So, you know, I think all of us have a front door, and I don't know what it costs, but a set of bands is about $40, and I think the contraption was probably $30. So for under $100, everybody can get the contraption that goes around the front door and hook your bands up to it and do a workout every single day. It even comes with the workout. So, but we could help with the workouts as well. In fact, you know, Haase could probably have one of the instructors go through an entire workout with the crossover bands on video so parents could see it. That'd be real easy to do. But yeah, definitely try to get bands in your house. And they can do those every day.
Yep. Let's see. So Ashley Lear says, filling the cup is an analogy that sold me with the twins and the PT. It helped my son a ton as a player for sure. Completely agree. Just makes sense. That seems logical, but I remember what I was going to say. I always like to present the other side of the argument, not to be politically correct or anything like that, but I want to talk about how I understand, and I know Jason, you do too, why parents might not value training as much. And it comes down to education, peer pressure, access or knowledge of someone that is adequate to do that. And just parents are always trying to do the best. They're saying, hey, I want my son to get better or my daughter to get better. And there's a siren going. I need to do something. The next logical step from what I know from when I played was people went and did lessons. Let me go ask around, and then word of mouth, I'm going to find out this person does lessons. Okay, that's better than nothing. And to an extent, yeah, I would agree with that. But if you're watching this, if you're looking around all those other things and you're reading good material or watching videos and how to get better in performance, start with the body moving better, getting stronger, getting more able to perform at high levels, and then work on the craft and fine-tuning things.
Well, let me add to this, Scott, on that. So here's what I think the reason is. Even the most biased parents out there can watch their son pitch or hit or field and know, just because they can see everybody on the field, their opponents, their teammates, they can see whether their child is hitting or pitching at the level that he should be hitting or pitching at. In other words, a parent can gauge their player's performance fairly well and know whether they're having success or not. What parents don't have most parents don't have the education is to see how well their kid moves. So they might have a son that doesn't hit well or a son that doesn't pitch well. And so they think, oh, I've got to go get him hitting lessons, or I have to go get him pitching lessons. What they don't see is his inability to move, which is causing the poor performance. That's where if I walk out onto a baseball field, I don't see mechanics first. I see how well can a kid move first. Like, I can immediately tell if a kid can move well or not. And if he can move well, then I can dial in on his mechanics. But the problem is a lot of parents just don't have the eye for, does my son move well or not? So they think, oh, he's struggling hitting, I'm going to go get him hitting lessons. Well, that hitting instructor, if he has any talent at all, is going to run into the same problem that we run into, which is, hey, I've gotten this kid so far, and now his lack of movement or his inability to move is, I've hit a ceiling with him. I can't go any further. Now, they're not going to tell you that. They're just going to keep taking your money, which is unfortunate. That's why we're like, you guys have to go to PT. You have to become a better mover. And we're trying to educate our parents on moving so that they can see that. And I think that's probably the magic ingredient to get parents to buy into all this. But I think that's what it comes down to. They see little Johnny not pitching well or not hitting well, and they think the reason is he needs more hitting and pitching instruction. And usually it's he needs to be able to move better. So.
All right, well, I don't think I see any other. Oh, hold on. Could you give a link for a good set of bands? The boys said the bands they have don't have the attention they need.
So you can you add the crossover to the live feed in Facebook, crossover link?
So I'm just going to.
So while he's doing that, folks watching, you probably do not need any more than the green or purple bands. The yellow bands for our college guys and our probably more elite high school guys. I mean, usually the high school guys are half yellow, half like purple. Is purple the one that's below that? Very few guys are going to need red. That's more of like a elite major league player or, high-level college player. So the green or purple bands are all you should need. I know with my son we have green bands, which is, I believe, the lightest one the crossover has. So anyone from 12U and down can probably get green or purple.
Yep. And I guess I'll just add, so the ones that I showed here with the Jaeger bands, so it's Jaeger, they've got the adult and youth. I tell most of our middle school and even high school guys that they should be using the youth. Don't pay attention to what it's called, because even, I'm not a youth, I'm an adult. Even with these, it's pretty tough to use. It's actually a lot of resistance, which guys are used to thinking, oh, I need a lot of resistance to really get a good workout in. For these, if we're just working on the small rotator cuff muscles, which are what you hear a lot of injuries are involving, someone tears a rotator cuff, those muscles are very small. So the easiest way to explain it to guys or players on why you should use the lighter weight, and you're going to think it's too light. Well, the reason you should use the lighter, so the youth, even through high school, or the green and the purple for the crossover infantry, the reason you should use smaller is because you've got smaller muscles. If that doesn't make complete sense, I explain, and then you've got deltoids right here, which are large muscles over your shoulder. When you do things like this, you've got these big muscles that show, I mean, you can feel them right here. These are your deltoids. Underneath that, is a set of 4 different muscles, your rotator cuff muscles, that try to hold in your humerus bone, this arm bone, try to hold it in the socket. So there's, 4 small little muscles. And what happens is, if I have too heavy of a weight, I'm pulling a band that is too heavy, my big muscles are going to take over. The little muscles don't do as much. If I have a lighter weight, my big muscles don't have to use as much strength or anything, so they just kind of hang out, while the small muscles still need to do work. And you might need to do 10, 12, 15, or even 20 reps until you feel it. But the first time I work with a guy who's using a light enough or an adequate enough band, and they go and they start going, and they're just, oh, this is easy. And I'm like, is it pretty easy? They say, yeah. I said, keep going. And then all of a sudden they'll be like, oh. And I'll say, what? Like, oh, I feel it. It's like a little pain. Well, it's one of the rotator cuff muscles, typically in the back. They've got one that starts to work, and that's what they're using, as opposed to the bigger muscles to just start doing this. And guys usually lose their posture and all that. But you need to be able to not incorporate these big ones so you can use the small ones underneath, and that's why you need the lighter bands. There are some exercises where you might need heavier ones, which is why I do like, there's pros and cons of both, but I do like the crossover symmetry bands because it incorporates a heavier one for exercises where you might need more resistance, and then lighter for the lighter ones, so you can get the rotator cuff muscles. Let's see if there's anything else here. Okay, I don't see anything else, so unless you have anything else to add, I am going to probably upload this to as many places as possible, probably put it on YouTube, and I'll try to include in the bottom in the description, like when we start talking about college recruiting and like the minute it starts and that kind of thing, so that'll help out. Anything else you want to add, Jason?
No, I think this was fun for the first one, and hopefully it is the first of many, and we have a big, huge crowd for the next one. And
yeah, my goal was double digits. We made it to double digits on both platforms. So
sweet.
Yeah, but it's nice when we can share this. Yeah, I mean, we have conversations like this all the time, so this will be pretty easy. I'd like to bring on a parent at some point, a former and a current, and then, oh, Brooks just texted me. That was his comment, not Ashley's. So he was, I'm assuming, using her account. But yeah,
her account.
If anyone has any suggestions for topics or other people we should talk to, I'd like to get other coaches, instructors, parents, former and current, to kind of get some of their feelings, then that'd be great. Anything you want to add to that, Jason?
No, it's fun.
Well,
love talking baseball.
That's right. I'm going to end the recording and end the meeting. And thank you, everyone, for coming out and checking us out from your homes and your comforter realm. And